Writing. Let's talk about writing. Being a writer, as far as this class is concerned, is not about the things perhaps you think being a writer is about. All right? We're going to talk about 3 quick lessons today, and hopefully these will become the themes of this class for you. All right, number 1, okay? I want to disabuse you of a few notions. Writing is not about inspiration. That says inspiration. All right? Writing is not about inspiration. Okay? We'll get into this more. Writing is not about ideas. Actually, it does say ideas, so I can just Google. Writing is not about ideas. We will talk about that. Writing, more specifically getting published, is not about luck. Okay? What is writing about then? Writing is about skill. And today I want to try and prove this to you. Okay? Let's use some metaphors. We're writers, right? This is the kind of stuff we do. How many of you, when someone sits down to play piano for you, how quickly can you tell if they're a good pianist or not?
35 notes.
35 notes.
325.
325. Okay. Basically, everybody in this room can judge a pianist's level of skill within a minute or 2 of playing. Not exactly, but you can know if this is someone who's good at the piano or if this is someone who's still an amateur at the piano. You can probably tell if this is a master versus just someone who's pretty good. Okay? Editors, published writers, people who know what they're doing, can do the same thing with 1 page of your writing in the exact same way. That is why it's not about inspiration, ideas, or luck. Because in 1 page, I can judge how good a writer you are. Okay? People wonder, why can editors reject manuscripts? Or in this new age where we are sometimes bypassing editors, how come readers just put something down after 1 page when they haven't given it a real shot? You guys can judge this too. You've read enough, you know enough, you can judge if something is going to work for you pretty quickly. Perhaps not as quickly as most editors can, but you'll know. You'll read a chapter and you'll know if that person is a master, if they're in that medium grade where they've got some good things going on, it's still readable, but they're obviously not a master, or if this is someone's first novel they wrote when they were 12. You can tell all of these things. So how do you develop this skill? Practice. Hey, somebody knows what they're doing. The reason that I say it's not about inspiration and ideas and luck are all important, but it's not about those things. The reason I say this is, let's say that, let's use another metaphor. You are world star batter on a baseball team. When you step up to the plate to hit that ball and you connect, is it inspiration, ideas, or luck? Ideas are the wrong metaphor here, but is it luck? It's skill. You have done that so many times that when you step up to swing, you know exactly what to do. Sorry, you guys are in the spray range. I'm just warning you. You're also kind of in the wacky range. This is kind of tight quarters, so I'll apologize ahead. But it's not for the hitter, for the baseball player. It's not a matter of luck when they connect. Okay. It's a matter of having spent thousands of hours practicing how to do that. And one thing that I want to encourage in you is to start looking at writing as a little bit more of a performance art. Okay? When you sit down to write, all of that skill comes into bear. And if you have practiced enough, your mind will figure out the problems that you're trying to work on the page. It will figure out how to bring out the characters. It will figure out how to create a plot that is really engaging. It will do this all in interesting ways because it's just natural to you. The same way that the pianist sitting down to play that piece doesn't think about it, how it goes. We'll talk a lot in this class about the behind the scenes. We'll break it down. We'll say, here's what writers are doing. The trick to remember is, almost none of the time, that's a really awkward way to say that. Most of the time, we are not sitting there consciously and thinking, I need to follow Brandon's first law of magics, or I need to build a try-fail cycle for this character. We're not thinking that any more than the baseball player is thinking, all right, I bring my bat down at this trajectory, at this exact force, in order, they don't think that. Perhaps they have thought that on occasion, but they're not thinking it at that moment. So, keep that in mind as we talk about how to write books in this class. I will focus on novel writing. Why? Because that's what I'm good at doing. I am mediocre at short stories. I'll be upfront with you about that. I'm okay at novellas. If I can get to 15 or 20,000 words, I start to do okay. I'm terrible at 5,000 words. I will try to bring in someone who can talk to you about short stories and tell you more about them, if I can. The other reason I talk primarily about novels is I'm willing to bet that almost everyone in this room reads novels, but that very few of you read a lot of short stories. Let's just do a raise of hands. Anyone here subscribe to a short story magazine? All right, so we've got 2 of you. What do you subscribe to?
Well, Leading Edge.
Leading Edge, okay, yeah, Leading Edge.
Podcastle.
Okay, yeah,
Leading Edge.
Leading Edge, okay. So, some of the podcast ones and some of the online ones are really fun. Daily SF and things like that. But it's telling that nobody in this room subscribes to Asimov's, Analog, or F&SF, the 3 big science fiction fantasy magazines, because young people don't, demographically. If we were doing this 30 years ago, a good half to 60% of the room would have subscribed to one of these magazines. Most of you don't read a lot of short fiction, so you really shouldn't be writing a lot of short fiction. One of the primary questions we get as a writer, is, should I start with short fiction? Because once upon a time, with all the short fiction markets that were out there, starting with short fiction was the good way to break in. It no longer is. It's still a good way if you're good at it, but there's such different art forms. If you spend all your time practicing with the short story and never with the novel, and yet the novel is what you want to be doing, you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice. Plus, with the direct publishing methods we have nowadays, where you can just directly reach an audience, there's no reason not to be writing novels if novels are what you read and novels are what you want to write. So we will talk about novels. If you really want to do short stories, I will allow you for the class to write a short story collection instead of a novel as your 50,000 words. But that's only if you're actually serious about it and you're like one of these fellows who is actually reading short stories quite a bit. I would count it if you bought any of the world's best anthologies or something like that. The rest of you should be writing novels. You can pick your genre. There are a wide number of things you could do. I won't even force you to write science fiction and fantasy because I always hated it when my professor said, you can't write science fiction and fantasy. So I just wrote it anyway and dared them to fail me, and they never did. Even Professor Thayer would never fail me, even though I know he wanted to. So I won't make you, but I strongly suggest it since a good third of our time in the lectures will be talking about science fiction and fantasy elements. You can write children's. That includes middle grade and YA. I hope you're not writing picture books or chapter books because I have no idea how to help you if you are. You should really be taking Rick Walton's class instead. But I'm going to assume that you all are writing at least a middle grade novel. Middle grade is targeted at 9 to 12-year-olds. You know, Harry Potter started in middle grade. Or YA, or science fiction or fantasy for adults. Steampunk counts in that, urban fantasy counts in that, teen paranormal romance, sure, if you want to. Whatever it is you want to do, all right? because the fundamentals will be pretty much the same regardless of which of those you're doing. Hardcore military, SF, or whatnot. I will let you write what you want to do. Ideas. One thing to get through your head is that ideas are usually cheap. Boy, those don't erase real well. I'll try using these guys. And they do say dry erase. They don't say permanent. Don't put it on anything. So I should be okay. But one thing to get over is the idea that a great idea is to make a great book. Well, a certain quality of idea is important. However, a great writer can take the most basic ideas and make a brilliant novel out of it. And a terrible writer will take the best ideas in the world and will turn them into something terrible. Okay? Once in a while, there's an idea like, I usually refer to Jurassic Park as one of those ideas I wish I had. Bring back dinosaurs and make a theme park out of them. That is a really great story seed, and some are better than others. But the thing to teach you is ideas should be cheap. You shouldn't have to worry about your ideas. You should not coddle your ideas and treat them as sacrosanct. You shouldn't think, I have this one novel I've been working on for so long and it's the perfect book and I need to just get it done and then everything will be great. Instead, you should be thinking, boy, that book that I've been working on for 10 years that I started, that is my baby, is such a big millstone hung around me. I should cast that aside, start fresh with something new, write it for a few months, and teach myself to write. And then, once I know how to write, then maybe I can do justice to that magnificent idea that I've been working on for 10 years, that now is just turning out to be, I've been churning and working on it for so long that I've even forgotten how many drafts I've done. And, this was in one draft, and this other thing was in another draft, and I forget that I've taken this out. It gets to be a big mess. So for this class, you will have to cast aside anything you've been working on before unless you come and get specific permission from me. Someone who has a book contract has permission to work on what they have a book contract for. Or I guess you have an agent, but not a contract yet.
Yeah, no.
But for the most part, you should be taking anything you've written on before. You can take something you've got ideas for, you've planned, but anything you've written on before, you should cast aside and start fresh from the beginning for this class.
You've written like an introductory chapter or something.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine on that. You go with the spirit of the law. What are we doing? You're putting this in front? Oh, sure, put the microphone in front of me. Make it easy for people to listen. You're going to get the lapel mic for me, right?
Yeah.
I'm eventually going to... Didn't I feel all cool and techy and stuff like that? Yeah, sorry people listening online who might actually be doing it. Hi. We're trying something new this year. Apparently, we can actually release this online if we want to, so we're going to. And he's doing a master's degree something, or honors something, or...
I haven't applied for the program yet.
Okay.
It'll be instructional technology.
Okay. By the way, as an aside, I think we've got like 5 PhD students in my class. Who are the PhD students? I looked into. There are people. Maybe it just lists PhD if you're on the thing if you've got like too many credits or something. No one's actually a PhD. Oh, it said on my class roll. Okay, you're one.
JD.
What's that? Oh, JD. Ooh, hey, an attorney. It's always good to know more attorneys. Anyone else like? I assume a few of you are in like the Marriott School or something like that, or. Yeah, Marriott School? Okay. Yeah, because these people can sneak in, your Marriott School too, can sneak in and register early for the class so they can get all the spots. And so it says on my thing I have like 4 PhD students, but they must just list that if you have a certain credit threshold. Some of you must just be eternal students who are continuing education and have like, 300 credits or something. And like they must be in a PhD because otherwise why would they want so many classes? But anyway, ideas. Ideas should be cheap. You should not treat them as sacrosanct. One of my favorite stories, you can ask Jim Butcher about this. He shared it before, where he was making this argument on a forum once before he was published, and a certain other person was kind of the opposite school of thought. There's a school of thought that says, and don't write this down because it's wrong, writing is mystical. Right? Writing is about, sitting and then, the muse strikes. I assume not the band. and the muse strikes you, and something like pops out of your head like a Fina, and it's just like, boom! And then, book! And then somehow in between this, it's like, you win a Pulitzer! I don't know, that's probably not what they get anyway. Not a Pulitzer, a National Book Award, there you go! And then you're drafted in the basketball team. And it's all one of, there's this feeling that that's what it is. I don't subscribe to this at all. Okay? I really, really don't. That's not to say that sometimes cool inspiration doesn't hit you, because we all kind of go through that. You'll have times you're like, I'm just on fire today and I don't know why. And you're writing and it's great and it's awesome. But the thing to remember is, for every writer who's a real pro that I've talked to, they have moments like that, and they have moments where it's pure drudgery, where they sit and it's like chopping wood, as Howard Taylor puts it. You just hit and you chop the wood and you do what you know you need to do. And at the end of the day in the book, I have found that readers can't tell the difference between these two. Okay? They can't tell the difference. And that's because through the drafting process, you make this one better and you take out all the pretentiousness of this one. Because this one has a lot of pretentiousness in it. And in this one, it'll probably be a little dry, but you'll have some moments of inspiration where you make connections, and this prose will get a little bit more engaging, and this one will get a little less annoying, and then they'll meet in the center, and you'll have your level of writing that's pretty cool. Okay? So, anyway, Jim Butcher's arguing with this guy, and the guy's like, no, you gotta have world-class ideas to be a world-class writer, and Jim's like, okay, fine, give me the two worst ideas you can come up with, and I will write a book about it, and it will be awesome. And so the person told them, okay, your ideas are Pokemon and the Lost Roman Legion. Write a book about that. And so he wrote this book called Coda Telera, which he eventually sold and became a big best-selling epic fantasy series. Okay? You can go find that story online. It's a great story. It's true. Codex Alera is a cross between Pokemon and the Lost Roman Legion. Jim, if you're watching this and I'm wrong, then why didn't you tell me when I asked you? Because I think he dodged the question when I asked him in person. I can't remember. Anyway, ideas are cheap. Okay? You are going to write 50,000 words. 50,000 words is, oh boy, what's a page count on that? 10,000 or 2,000. 2,000. 200 pages, right? Yeah, 200 pages. That's 200 pages. What? Double-spaced Times or double-spaced Courier or something like that. So that's a pretty hefty chunk. The reason I chose 50,000 words is because that's what NaNoWriMo encourages people to do. National Novel Writing Month, where people try to write a novel in 1 month in November. It's really hard to do unless you're writing full-time. However, a lot of people can get to 20,000 words, and so I figure in this class 50,000 words is a pretty manageable goal. It really shouldn't be that hard for you. In order to do this, though, you're going to have to turn off your internal editor. Okay? You are going to have to stop revising and rewriting. And in a little bit, we will talk about the differences between outliners and multi-drafters. So what we're going to do is we are going to write every week. We are going to submit 1,000 words of that to our writing group. I would suggest that you don't worry that your writing group isn't going to keep up with what you're doing, because you're going to write more than your writing group can read. So I would suggest submitting your first 1,000 words, and then your second, and then your third, and so forth, if that makes sense. Even though you'll be writing like your 25th that week, you just have to get used to that idea. Conversely, if you write something that's standalone-ish, like a new viewpoint or something, you go ahead and submit that to your writing group. We do this over LiveJournal. We do this over LiveJournal because the first few years we did it over email, and people had all kinds of excuses about why their email didn't get sent, or blaming their email server, or boy, I'm sure it got there. It just must have gone to your spam folder. So we junked all that business, and now you post it on LiveJournal, because the reason for LiveJournal is you can create a new account really easily, and it has good friend protection, meaning you have to friend somebody. You can set it so that you have to friend them to see your work. That way you're not posting your work online for everyone. And it's very easy for your group then to see what you've posted and to read it. They can even leave feedback on the live journal. It's a great tool for us in this class. So you need your homework for this week. I will not force you to submit new writing next week. Okay. For next week, we'll talk about what you can submit. I'll give you a little bit of time to get going. But your homework for next week is to set up that live journal account and add me as a friend, because otherwise you can't read your writing. Every year I have someone forget to add me, and then I sit down to read their week, and it's like, oh, great! Yeah, I'm not a friend, so I can't see your writing. So I have to try and email you or contact somebody who's in your group to copy it and paste it and send it to me. It's a big pain, so do it, okay? Don't forget to add me. And do please create your live journal name like I said on here, even if you already have a live journal account, because it'll help me keep track of who's in what group. All right, you'll use your group number and the year and your first name, and then I can match you to your face, to your writing. It's so easy for me. I know you want to be Skiwumpus17 or whatever it is that your name is, your online name, but please just be John 2011 Group 4 instead, for my sake. Okay? So you're going to join LiveJournal, you're going to set up your thing, you're going to add all your friends, we'll split you up into writing groups at the end of the class, and then for next week, submit something, but it can be writing you've done already. Okay? So if you've already got a chapter done on the thing you're going to write, submit part of that. The rest of you can submit an outline. If you want to work an outline, you can submit a little piece of writing you've done before that you want feedback on. This is kind of your freebie week where I let you get away with stuff that I won't let you get away with other weeks. The rest of the weeks you have to submit writing you wrote during this class this semester. Not something you wrote last semester, this semester. The reason for that is that I want to put the boot to your head. Those of you who have been submitting the same thing to creative writing classes and to writing groups over and over again for the last 3 years. I know there's 1 or 2 of you in this class. Stop it, okay? Write new stuff. This is what being a writer is all about, okay? Other than that, it's finished the 50,000 words. Our final will be, you turn in the 50,000 words and you earmark 2,000 of it for me to do a critique on. And I'll give you a nice in-depth critique on it. It should generally be the first 2,000 words, or something near at the beginning with a new viewpoint or something like that. Try to make it a little self-contained, not like your best 2,000 words from chapter 47. By the way, never submit the best 2,000 words from chapter 47 to an editor. Okay, you might as well just pick your favorite words randomly throughout the book and submit them in a big long list and say, look, I have a good thesaurus, because that's going to do you just as much good. They want to see the beginning because that's what their readers are going to see. Okay? Okay, any questions on what we're doing in the class? Submit 1,000 words every week to your writing group, read your writing group submissions, do 50,000 words by the end of the year, and you will get an A, probably. Almost certainly. You might get an A- if your writing is terrible. But if you do all that, you're going to, I've never given lower than a B+. In fact, honestly, someone who's done all 50,000 words, all the reading, and turned it in, I've never given lower than an A-. This is about, the goal of this class is to learn how to have good habits as a writer. If I graded you based on how likely you were to publish, then there would be 2 people in the, there was a spread. There would be 2 people in the history of the class who ended up getting A's because I have 2 students who got published and went on to become full-time writers. So I can't do that. That's not really fair. I'm hoping there will be more students, or that there already are more that I haven't heard of. But there are 2 that have gone on to be full-time writers. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? I'm not going to say it's annoying because it's kind of steampunky, but it is. All right. Let's talk about being a discovery writer versus an outliner. Okay? Discovery writers and outliners. This is kind of getting into the idea of. I'll preface this with the concept of lesson 2 I want to teach you today. Lesson 1 is about skill. Lesson 2 is about tools. Again, not the band. I guess the band doesn't have an S. So that was kind of a lame pun. You'll get used to those. It's okay. Tools. Different writers write differently. And aside from a few general principles, there is no one way you have to do this. Okay? Now for the class, I'm going to put certain restrictions on you to try and force you to use certain tools to see if they work for you. At the end of the class, you may very well decide that these tools don't work for you and discard them. By tools, I mean methods of writing. Has anyone ever had a teacher or a book you've read on writing tell you that you have to have an outline? Occasionally you'll get these. Has you ever read one that says you can never have an outline? I think On Writing by Stephen King says never to use one. This is because people who write these books or who do these, sometimes they're great writers. On Writing by Stephen King is brilliant. It's wonderful. And Stephen King's a great writer. However, he says don't use the writing group, and he says don't really use an outline. Well, those are tools that he uses. Different writers are going to use different tools, and there's no one way to write a book. And this is best manifest by the idea of discovery writers versus outliners, because it's pretty stark. And I found over the years that a lot of people fall into one of these two camps, and they're kind of mutually exclusive. The discovery writers are those writers who work best when they don't have a lot of structure. This means that if they're forced to write an outline ahead of time, what happens to discovery writers is that they tend to get bored with that book by the time they're done with the outline, because they feel like they've just already done it, and so they want to move on to something else. Or they feel like they're really constricted, and the characters have no life because their lives are determined for them ahead of time. George R. Martin is a discovery writer. If you can't tell by how long it takes him to write books. George R. Martin is a discovery writer. He uses the term gardener, which is a great term for a discovery writer. Discovery writers are those who tend to grow their story. Now, we're not talking about this muse mumbo-jumbo over here. Discovery writers are those, they're still going to work on their stories every day. It's not going to be about inspiration as much as inspiration is important. But inspiration, the real inspiration, comes through lots of hard work and sweat, and then finally something clicks, if that makes sense. Inspiration is not staring at a wall until something clicks. Inspiration is sitting and working until something clicks. And so discovery writers do work best without an outline. Okay? On the other side, we have what we call outliners. George Martin again calls these architects, which is a wonderful term. I don't know if I spelled that right. This is why I have spell check and copy editors. So outliners. Outliners are those who, if they sit down to write a book, and there's just an empty, open vastness in front of them, they have no idea where to go, and don't ever get going. Outliners work best when they know what their goal is. They say, oh, I am shooting for this specific type of story. And if I take this type of story and I break it down into its components, then I have this step, and this step, and they essentially are building a story through the small pieces, the small steps. It's kind of the engineer way to write a book. And outliners will therefore build an outline for themselves. An outline is not like heading 1, subheading B, yada yada. An outline is a sequence of events that you're using as a guide, a map to write your book. Okay? Architects tend to have pretty explosive endings that come together really well. If you think of books you've read that have really zinger endings, the authors were probably architects. Orson Scott Card is a famous architect, okay? And he tends to do a lot of outlining for his books, spends months outlining, and then he says he sits down and writes the book in a couple of weeks because he's done so much pre-writing. Another friend of mine, Kevin J. Anderson, is a heavy outliner. In fact, the way he writes his books is he writes a very in-depth outline, almost as a story proposal or pitch. He's famous enough and has enough publishing history that he doesn't need to write proposals for his books. He can just say, hey, I want to write about this, and they'll let him, and they'll give him money. But instead, he does these big proposals because it helps him write the book. And then when he sits down to write his book, he like takes each sentence in the proposal. It doesn't look like an outline. I've seen them. They're just like long, long proposals in prose form. But he takes each sentence and kind of expands that, and takes the next sentence and expands that, and turns it into a book that way. He's also famous for writing with dictations. He actually goes out hiking, takes his headset, and dictates a scene, and then has someone transcribe it, and then he edits on page. So, a lot of people tend to fall in one of these camps. A lot of you will be in between, but you'd be surprised at how many people tend to fall into one of these camps. The thing about it is, you really don't know for sure which one of these are, or in which situations which of these will work better for you, until you try them both out. In this class, you can do one or the other, but if you're going to be an outliner, you've got 1 week to make your outline, and that should be enough. Okay? Let's talk about kind of the foibles and follies of these two types of writers. Discovery writers, this isn't 100%, but discovery writers tend to like to revise a lot. They like to get it just right before they move on. And so you'll find that discovery writers, what they'll do is they'll write a chapter, and they'll be like, okay, that's pretty good. They'll do a couple drafts on it, and then they'll write the next chapter and explore where their characters are going, and they'll be like, oh, now I know better where my book is going. So they'll go back and they'll rewrite the first chapter a couple times, and then they'll rewrite the second chapter a couple times, and then they'll write the third chapter and be like, oh, I've discovered where my book's going now. And then they'll jump back and start over again with chapter 1 and do this over and over and over again. If any of you have written, chapter 1 of your book like 12 times, then this might be a problem you're falling into. Oh, I see someone laughing that you did it. Yeah. Then this might be your problem. Discovery writers generally need a kind of that kick to the head to keep going. They need to learn to just keep going, because what a discovery writer is really doing is writing a really long outline for their book. And then when you start over, after you finished it, your revision will usually be pretty dramatic, because then you'll know where your book's going, and you'll be able to write it through and fix it really well. So discovery writers need to keep going most of the time. The other thing discovery writers have a problem with is endings. Because they don't know where they're going, discovery writers tend to get to like the 90% mark of their book and then be like, all right, I guess it ends. This works okay in literary fiction, where the I guess it ends ending is kind of like the main ending that people do, and then it ended. But it doesn't work so well in popular fiction, where people actually want, resolution and these sorts of things. And so discovery writers need to learn how to write endings. And usually what they need to do is finish their book, give it to people, and brainstorm that ending, so that when they do their second draft, they can point toward that ending more. I see you nodding a lot. Are you a discovery writer?
I think I lean
more that way. On the other side, over here, outliners. Outliners have something we call world builder's disease a lot of times. World builder's disease is you love building a setting and tweaking it and coming up with the perfect world that you're going to write, and so you spend 20 years writing the perfect world and never actually get around to writing your book. This is a big problem with architects. Another big problem with architects is that they tend to rip through a first draft and be like, all right, that's okay, and then just throw it aside and start on something new. This is what I did. Yeah, that's why I wrote 13 books before I sold one. I finished one, I'm like, hey, that was fun, I'll do another one. And then immediately was more excited about the next project than this project. The I'm excited about the next thing tends to be a bit of an outliner architect thing, though it can fall into both. The thing is, you'll probably have attributes of both of these, depending on what you're doing, and you'll probably use different aspects of these for different parts of your writing. Through my history as a writer, I've found that I can use both tools for different situations. I tend to architect my worlds and my settings and discover write my characters. Works very well for me. Helps me keep my characters a little bit fresh. Now, it helps me keep them alive rather than feel like their life is written out of them, but it also lets me have explosive endings. The problem with doing this means that my characters have line item veto over the outline, and so I often have to stop them because I'm an architect. I can't just let them run wild. as a lot of discovery writers would do, I have to stop and say, okay, they wouldn't do that. I have to rebuild my outline. And so I can have to go back to the outlining stage several times during the writing of a book, which can be kind of frustrating when you want to, just making progress. And you're like, no, this character wouldn't do that. To the person they've become, I have to rebuild my entire plot. I've gotten good at doing that, but it has ruined books for me early on in my career, once I didn't publish, or it made certain books take a lot longer because I didn't quite understand this process. But my children's books, I completely discovery write, just for a fun exercise. If I try to do an epic fantasy that way, it's a disaster. But in 50,000 words, I can discovery write a pretty decent book that comes out the way I want it to. I can't discovery write it over 100,000 words. And that's just what I've discovered about myself. I need that goal, and I need to have that outline in order to keep multiple plot threads together. So, yeah.
So just for example, something like the Stormlight Archives, if you're talking about a 10-book series, you kind of have your outline.
I have an outline for the whole series, yes. Now that outline for some parts of it is like a paragraph here and a paragraph there. That page, this book is about this. But I at least know where I'm going and things like that. And you will find that a lot of discovery writers do very well to have one point on their outline, which is it ends here. And when discovery writers have that one point in the outline, then it can be really helpful for them to have that better ending and to keep their book focused. And you'll find that architects do a little bit better when they let themselves discovery write a few things. They build themselves a framework, but then build in some wiggle room here and there, that they learn themselves how to actually, that wiggle room works for them. For me, it's the characters. For you, it might be something else. And you'll find that adds some spontaneity to your books. These are different tools. And so the idea is, as writers, and in this class, my goal is going to be to try and give you a bunch of these tools, to explain the tools, to show what's useful about them and what might be problems with them, and let you kind of collect them in a toolbox for yourself, so that as you're writing, you can try them out and see if they work for you. If they don't, toss them aside. Writing groups are a tool. We will be using writing groups in this class. For instance, a writing group can really make your book better, but some of you, it's just not going to be that useful. It's much more useful for architects than it is for outliners generally. Architects than for discovery writers generally. That's because discovery writers' books are unformed, and if they show unfinished writing to people, then they suffer sometimes from, gee, wouldn't it be cool syndrome, right? Gee, wouldn't it be cool if your characters did this? And you're like, oh, that's so cool, I need to write that book instead. And then you add that into your book. And then someone says, oh, but wouldn't it be cool if you did this? And you're like, yes, it would be. And you add that into your book, and suddenly your book is like a schizophrenic hodgepodge where like trying to, be like somehow a military science fiction paranormal romance at the same time. And you're like, and I must have vampires. And vampires are cool. They can't be like regular vampires, so they're going to drink antifreeze. They're carbon. It's like, that can be really troubling for you. But let's talk about how to do writing groups. A few simple things. I'm going to change colors. A few simple things about writing groups that will help your writing group be more effective. What you're going to do is you're going to submit your 1,000 words on, what did I say, Monday night? Yeah, Monday night. Okay? If your internet goes out, go to your roommate or to the next door neighbors, to your parents' house and post it, okay? Just get it up there by Wednesday morning so your group can have time to read it. You're going to read their submission of 1,000 words, and you're going to take some notes. I want you to come with things to say, okay? Don't just say, it's good. Okay? No, it's good. Blah. That's useless. Not helpful. What are you going to do? You are going to take specific notes on what you liked. Okay? Saying it's good is useless. Saying, this character is really engaging to me and I want to see where they go. This other character was not so engaged with me. I can't even really remember who they are. They're not very memorable. Those are two excellent comments from a writing group. You should is a bad comment. Okay? No. You are not telling them how to write their book. You are giving feedback. Remember, you treat yourself when you're reading their piece. Like sometimes they'll show test movies to like a test audience to judge their reaction. At that point, the test audience is not saying, Mr. Lucas, I really think that you should. No, they're saying, yeah, I had fun here. I was bored here. That's what you're looking to give them. Okay. So, number one, remember to give good feedback. What I mean by that is remember to say good things too. Okay. Remember to take notes on what you liked about it in specifics. So 2, be specific. 3, learn how to write, Brandon. Be specific. Number 3, be descriptive, not proscriptive. Okay? This one's very hard to get down, but it's going to be a really great tool for you in all feedback to writers you know. Describing your reaction to it is so much more useful than saying, this is what's wrong with it. Okay? The reason for that is manyfold. Number 1, it's not so argumentative, which is good. You're critiquing someone's baby, someone's personal writing. And so saying, I was a little bit bored here, is actually going to be easier on them than saying, you should make this more exciting. Plus, it's actually more truthful. At some points, they may want you to be bored. I don't know, but they might want you to be bored. They're like, this character is a boring character, and I want you to read this and be like, all right, get on with it, like the character is feeling. There are times when they want you to be bored. So rather, if you say, make this more exciting, you may be undermining what they're actually trying to do. Now, most of the time, they're not going to write a boring character intentionally, but they may write an annoying character intentionally. I've done it before, okay? And they may want you to be a little confused about something because they're going to pow you with an explanation in the next scene, and it's all going to come together. So telling them I'm confused here is actually more useful because they're like, okay, let's see if the next scene clears that up, or if they're still confused, because sometimes a little bit of confusion is good. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes anticipation is good. Gee, I really want to have the answer to this. That's a good thing. But if the writer's saying, you should answer this right now, you need to answer this right now, that can be the wrong advice, because anticipation is what makes us keep reading. Okay? So, be descriptive. Be specific. Remember to give good feedback. And number 4, ignore. Wow, this is really bad writing. I'll make that word least readable. Ignore the small stuff. Ignore things that are little. Don't tell them when they spell the word wrong. Ignore that. By sitting on your writing group and your first leading comment is, I think you're using the word "and" too much. I'm going to throw something at you, okay? Maybe at the end of the session, that's something you can mention, but you need to lead with plot, characters, and setting, okay? Don't talk about the prose unless it's a big issue. If they're using the passive voice a ton, that's something you can bring up. But let's lead with the big things and then start talking about the prose, okay? Prose is important. But the worry is that if people start focusing too much on sentence-level things, this is all going to get revised and rewritten anyway, and we want to be focusing in this level. This is alpha reads. This is early draft. Everyone's writing is going to be rough because you won't have time to revise it. And so there's going to be lots of typos. There's going to be lots of awkward sentence constructions. And that's just how it's going to be, and it's okay. All right? So save that stuff to the end if you have to do it. Okay? Don't lead with it. Now, if you're being workshopped, there's one big rule. I'm going to enforce this one, and it will also make me throw things at you. So I want you to write it in big letters. No talking. If you are being workshopped, you are not allowed to speak. Let me say it again. If you are being workshopped, you cannot say a word. Every time I tell this to people, I'll go sit in their writing groups, and everyone has ignored it. This is your hard, fast rule. When it's your turn, shut up. Okay? There's really good reasons for this. Everybody who talks about workshops mentions it. Your job is to be the person with the clipboard standing at the back of that movie theater while people are watching and writing down, ooh, they said ah here. Ooh, they were excited here. Oh, they look a little bit bored. Your job is not to say, hey guys, this really does work. Just wait, I promise you. Or, no, it's really quite brilliant. If you see this thing and this thing and this thing, it's going to prove how smart I am, okay? That's what you're doing when you're talking, okay? Even if you think you aren't, that's what you're doing. What it's doing is it's, number one, it's biasing the reader. When you're saying, yeah, that gets fixed next chapter, you've just biased your readers and diluted the quality of your feedback. Okay? You want them next week to say, well, I found out the answer to that, and it actually now all works. That's what you want to hear. Or you want them to hear, yeah, the answer came, but I was confused because, it just didn't come soon enough. You want to hear those things. Okay? You also don't want to put people into an argumentative mindset. You don't want to defend yourself. And not talking is the best way to avoid defending yourself. Because if someone says, I just didn't think this character was really interesting, you're like, but they're fascinating! They lead a life of danger and crime. They're really interesting. They're the best character I've ever written. I think you're stupid. When you start saying these things, you're going to be fostering an environment where people will stop giving you good feedback. So, really, I'm serious about this. Don't talk when it's your turn. I will make an allowance for, at the end of the session, if you have a question or two that you want to direct the conversation toward, at the end of your 10 minutes, you can do that. But there's usually not much time for it, and you should really not pretend I didn't even say that, okay? You can do it if you need to. But let's really just avoid saying anything when it's your turn to do workshop. You'll find that the workshop is much better if you avoid saying anything. Now, the thing to keep in mind is I generally suggest, outside of this class, that people workshop pieces that they have completed. I'm not letting you do that in this class. So, be aware of the whole, gee, that'd be cool possibility, okay? If people are not being prescriptive, you're not going to have as much problem with that if they're being descriptive, but still, resist the urge to let your writing group ruin your book, because they'll try to. They'll give you good feedback and can make it much better, but they'll also kind of try to ruin it. Because they'll try to make it, particularly with newer writers, they'll try to make your book into the type of book they would write, rather than the type of book that you want to write. And they'll do this kind of unconsciously. Now, as workshoppers, when you're giving your feedback, try to look at what the book is trying to be, and try to gear your feedback toward what the book is trying to be, rather than what you want it to be. Don't try and take their teen paranormal romance, and just because you don't like teen paranormal romance, try to turn it into something else. I will try to group the writing groups so similar interested people are together in writing groups, so that shouldn't happen as much. But just keep that in mind, all right? And when you're being workshopped, write down their feedback, put it on a piece of paper, and then set it aside for when you do your revision of the book. When you do your revision of the book, look back at the feedback, read the scene again, having had that distance and probably having finished a lot more of the book, and then you can decide which of this feedback is going to work for you and which of it isn't. Most of the feedback that's going to work, you're going to be like, yeah, that's really right. And after several weeks of working on this and being farther ahead, you realize, yeah, I can fix this. This is really good feedback. This is much better. Some of it will just be dumb. And that's okay. We all give that dumb feedback sometimes because we don't know where the book is going and things like that. And so don't worry about that. I usually take 1 in 3 suggestions that my writing group makes. Maybe 1 in 2. Probably more 1 in 2. But I have 2 full-time professional writers in my writing group with me. And they make really good comments. So for that, take that for what it's worth. So there's your workshopping. Yeah.
You remember Calvin, but Calvin gave me advice about comments. He said if you're doubting something, don't speak to it.
That's Stephen King's advice too. And on writing, he says, generally, if someone makes a comment and he is uncertain about it, he ignores it. Unless 2 or 3 people start making the same comment, then he gives it more serious thought. But if it's your opinion versus one person's opinion, it's your book, so don't change it. And this is how my writing group works really well. Sit down. Number 1, there's a leader. Starts the time clock. Just can't hold it up for people. Just keeps an eye on the clock and says, all right, let's start just with one person. We're going to start with Katie. All right, we're going to start with Katie's piece. Who had what good things? What did you like about this? And then we get into the specifics of what people liked. for just a couple of minutes, with anyone throwing something out as a group discussion. Then, leader says, okay, let's move on to things that could use work. What things did you feel, what were your emotions on this that you feel were weaknesses of the piece? Where were you bored? Where were you confused? This sort of thing. People start throwing them out. They should have come with them prepared. Don't do your reading in class. Read before. If you do your reading in class, it doesn't count. You don't get points for that. And this is, by the way, all honor system. I hope that you're not, cheating in at the Lord's University on your honor for a class that doesn't even really matter for your for your major or for anything. It's an elective, so it's not worth it. Just besides, I'm a pushover. I'm not going to fail you. Anyway, then go into a discussion of what the major things is. Lead with the biggest things. Work your way down to smaller issues. And if you don't have time for the smallest ones, just move on. When that clock hits 10 minutes, go.